Stick around because I'm going to show you how to bind a quilt with your backing fabric and make mitered corners with it. Hi everybody, it's Claudia from Create with Claudia, and I have a really quick tutorial for you today. This is a method I like to do to bind my quilts. I don't bind my large quilts this way, and I'll tell you why in a second. But anything small like this, I've really gotten into this method. Basically, I'm going to show you how to bind your quilt using the backing fabric, folding it up towards the front, and giving you mitered corners. It makes a really nice finish, it's really easy, and you can use some of that backing fabric. So normally on my big quilts, I use 2.5-inch strips, I fold them over, and then I stitch them, machine stitch them on the front, and then flip them over, and I love, love, love to hand stitch them on the back. So anything larger, I would say, than a wall quilt, that's the way I bind my quilts. But when I'm doing smaller ones like this one, this is actually what we're going to make today, or even just maybe 42 by 42, even 50 by 50. I'll probably do this way. It's very manageable to do. You can do this method on larger, hey, you can do that on king size quilt, whatever quilt you want to try. I just find it easier on smaller quilts. In this video, I'm going to teach you 2 different ways to cut away the batting, because you do need to cut away the batting, not the backing, but the batting. You want to cut that away, and I'll show you how to do that. But there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is you will see the backing fabric on the front. So whatever your backing fabric is, it'll be that binding on the front. Now, one other thing for this is you will need a lot of clips. I love, love, love these little clips or pins, either one, but I like to use, for this method, I really like to use clips. It seems to hold the binding in place really well. So grab your project, your backing, some batting, and let's get to work. So this is the quilt block that we're going to be turning into a little mini quilt, and we're going to be using that backing fabric to bind it. But I'm going to show you how to start this from the beginning. The first thing you want is a square that is at least, and I will say this, I would give it at least 1.5 inches larger on each side than the square, or than your block or your quilt. In this case, this will be the quilt. I give myself about 2.5 to 3 inches just to be safe, because you know how sometimes when you quilt something it shifts a little bit. But yeah, that's what I like to have, is that larger big piece of backing fabric. And then you want a piece of batting, which you're going to kind of center in there. You're going to lay this backing fabric wrong sides up. So this is the good side, and this is the bad side, or the wrong side, I should say. And then you're going to center that, and again, I make my batting a little bit bigger than the block or the quilt top. I always do that because, you know, things shift when you're quilting. And then I center the quilt that I'm going to do right in the middle. And remember how I said at the beginning to keep in mind, you will see that binding. When you bind with the backing fabric, you will see that binding on the front. So you want something that you like, you know, you like the look of, because you're going to see it on the front. So the first thing I will do, now this all depends on your preference. I use, for smaller quilts especially, I use Hobbs fusible batting. It's premium, Hobbs heirloom premium fusible batting. I love this stuff for smaller things, because one of my biggest dislikes in quilting is pin basting. And when I press this according to their directions, it's no problem. This thing sticks together and I can quilt it very easily. So I'm actually going to go take this over and press this really quickly, and then you'll see what I mean, and then I'm going to quilt it. I am probably just going to do very simple quilting on this, just sort of some in the ditch. This is really easy since it has all these patches in it, and that should be enough to get this going. Alright, so this has been quilted. It's all good. You can see the backs. You just want to trim off all those little threads and everything. But it is ready to be trimmed down now, so we can start doing that binding from the back. There are a couple ways to do it, but before we do that, I just want to show you, when I quilted, I tried very, very hard, let me get up really close, not to go past the edge of the quilt top. So I stopped my stitch right there, right at the edge of all that quilt top, because you're going to be cutting away and getting rid of all of that excess batting. You're going to be cutting this batting away. And there are 2 ways to do that. The first way, which is not my favorite way, but you can if you want, is you can fold this back piece back to where those stitches start, like so, and just sort of finger press it back as far, and Then you're just going to trim away, because you don't, remember you stitched up to this point, so when you fold this back, presumably you're not going to cut any of that quilt top off. That's where it can get a little tricky, and you definitely want to cut on this side. Let me get my ruler. You want to make sure that you don't catch any of that backing fabric if you do it this way, because I have done that before and you cut a big slit in it and then you can't, then you got to bind it the other way with the strips, because it's once you cut a hole in it, you're done. But you can cut it off this way. I'm going to do this one edge this way, so you have to be really, really careful, and you want to get as close as you can to that edge, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I don't mess it up. I just scan all the way down, and this is a really hard method if you have a bigger quilt that you're doing this method on. I would not recommend it, only because you just can't see everything. But I'm going to do that for this. So that's the one way to do it. The other way is the way I like to do it. So you're going to take this now. Let me just show you the front. See how that's nice and even now? And you still have that backing fabric, because we're going to need that. So for the way I like to do it, and I smooth out those strings, is I get a nice sharp pair of scissors, and you're going to slide in between. Let me show you. You don't want to cut the fabric. You're going to slide your scissors, the bottom scissors, underneath, and just cut along that edge of that quilt top carefully, making sure you don't catch the back. And because this is fusible, I might need to just peel it up a little bit, depending on the kind of batting you're using, but it's easy. There we go. Okay. And I just very, very carefully cut this away, making sure not to cut the back fabric. This is a scary part for me, only because before I have done this before where I cut the back. In fact, I think it's in one of my videos, and it was very frustrating because I had worked hard on it and I was like, oh man. So there you go. It's not quite as neat. You might want to go back and trim it up a little bit, but you still have that back fabric intact, and then you're just going to go around the rest and just trim that all up. Okay, so the batting has been trimmed away, and if I said binding earlier, I meant to say batting. Sometimes I intertwine those two. I know what I'm talking about in my head, but not for the video. So the next thing you're going to do, I like to give myself an inch around the entire block or entire quilt top. So basically, I'm going to line my ruler up with the edge, measuring 1 inch out. And I'm pretty careful with this step as well. I just make sure, everything looks pretty lined up. And then I'm just going to cut off any excess fabric. Let's see. I do take my time on this, because once it's cut, you're done. Then it can't be cut again. So these are scraps. I'll keep these. I'm a scrap quilter at heart. I love doing scrappy projects. Rotate it around. And then what I like to do is use this ruler to help me line it up on the bottom, just to make sure I've squared it up nicely. And it looks like I have. Again, 1 inch out. And you're going to trim that off. And just keep going around till you're done. All right, so here it is. I just want to show you one edge of it. The first thing I do is you're going to fold up that edge, this outside edge, to the edge of the quilt that you've quilted. See how that's just folded in? You're not covering that yet. You're just folding that in. And I will actually go around and press that just so I have a nice crease there. I just go around the whole quilt, just folding it around just so this edge meets that quilt. thought you might want to see how it looks when I press it. This is just a preliminary pressing. Just going to fold that over, watching your fingers. Just give it a nice press around all four sides, just right up to that edge. All right, so here you have that nice little press, that little seam that we pressed, not seam, but edge that we pressed. And now we're going to start pinning a little bit, or pinning or clipping. I actually use these clips. I love using the clips when I'm doing this method. And I'm just going to clip a couple just to get it started. I fold over right to that edge of the quilt, in this case, just so it folds over nicely, and you keep that nice folded edge like so. Let me just show you so you can see it. And then we're going to do the corner. Now I'm showing you how to do the mitered corner, which means it has like a little diagonal look in it. You're going to fold this side over, okay? And then this side you can see is still open. Like I unfolded it from the seam that I ironed earlier, excuse me. And you're going to bring that over to like a 45. I'm going to clip one more time here. 45-degree angle. So let me show you again. So this is what it looks like. I'm going to use a pointer. That might be easier. There's what it looks like. And you're just going to fold that over in a little 45-degree angle. So let me move my fingers out of the way. It's going to look like that. Then you're going to fold that seam over, or that fold over again that we pressed earlier. So now it looks like this. Okay. And then you're going to fold it over. So there is always some bulk in the corners. And you might need to use your stiletto a little bit just to make it nice and sharp. Fold that over, and then I immediately pin or clip here so that doesn't slip out of place. There we go. So there's your mitered corner. Okay, so I zoomed out the camera a little bit so you can see a little bit better. You can see how I've clipped all the way around. I'm pretty generous with the clips. I might even add a few more. And if you watch my videos, you know I'm notorious for not pinning or clipping a lot. But for this, you definitely want to, or it's going to get all out of shape. So the next thing I'm going to do is take it over to my machine, and you are just going to sew all around the edge. And I do the inner edge. Let me get my pointer again. I do like 1/8 of an inch seam. Let me move it up to the camera. Shouldn't have zoomed out so quickly. I sew right there, right just 1/8 of an inch, barely 1/8 of an inch in, just to make a nice stitch. You can do as a decorative stitch if you want. I use a straight line stitch, but you could do maybe zigzag or some flowers, whatever you want. But then once that's done, this is bound. All right, here we go. That is what it looks like. I'm going to trim off all these little threads. Definitely go back. Normally, I don't use, well, it depends on my mood. But normally, I use a coordinating thread. In this case, I use this sort of orange, reddish orange color, so you can see it on the front. I think that kind of adds a nice little contrast. It's completely up to you. Like I said, you could do a real pretty decorative stitch along the edge, like a little flower or something. You know, whatever your mood is for the day or the project, I guess. I'm just going to go ahead and trim all these up. There's the back of it. I'll trim those up later. Nice smooth back. You have a lot less bulk when you do it this way. It's also easier. You don't have to cut a lot of strips. I love this method. All right, so what did you think of this method? I love this method, especially again for my, I know I've said that a couple times, but for my smaller pieces. Here's how it turned out one more time. Here's the back, nice smooth back. It makes it lay a lot flatter, I will say, using this method than when you put the binding on, like I do with my bigger quilts, you know, with the 2.5 inch strips. If you've never stopped by my channel, welcome. I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button. I do all kinds of free tutorials. I have a lot of patterns, new blocks, that kind of thing, and tips and tricks like this. All of my video tutorials also have companion blog posts over on my website, www.createwithclaudia.com, so you can check that out as well. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.